If you're ever reading a story about drugs in the news, you should always be very cautious because often they don't tell you the full story or they leave key bits of information out. Agendas were flinging in all directions 2 days ago when Sky News published a big exposé where they claimed to be sort of exposing people selling cannabis. To me, they missed out some really key bits of information, so let's break it down. It was an exposé on these sort of stickers or posters with QR codes that you might have seen all around the UK. The first thing is these have been around for about 2 to 5 years. They got really popular and much more prevalent about 2 years ago. So firstly, they're about 2 years late to the story. But anyway, they mention a guy called Steve. I'm not sure if Steve was just someone they interviewed or Steve was one of the journalists who worked on this story, but he used the QR code to actually order some weed and it arrived. He tried it, but he didn't like it because it affected his mental health. I think the big story that they've missed out on is the reality that a lot of these companies are actually selling semi-synthetic cannabis like HHC. That's what's often being sold when there's a QR code on a sticker on the street or on a poster. HHC is a semi-synthetic cannabinoid. It's not a fully synthetic cannabinoid like what a lot of people call spice, but it's semi-synthetic, meaning that it's extracted often from hemp plants and then put through a chemical process. And then the final product is put into vape pens or sprayed onto CBD weed or put into gummies, edibles, things like that. Because it's quite new, scientists don't know a lot about the long-term effects of semi-synthetic cannabis. It certainly has the potential for more harm than a natural product like cannabis, THC. So anyway, they claim to expose the people who are apparently selling this stuff, which I'm not really interested in. But then when you get to the end, you have some interesting sort of quotes from a UK-based cannabis clinic who are like, oh, don't buy it off them, buy it off us instead. But to me, they're actually using quite misleading information to sort of get to that point. So the real sort of propaganda here comes from the actual cannabis clinic, which I'm actually quite disappointed about. I'm a medical cannabis patient in the UK. This isn't the clinic that I'm with. So anyway, the guy from the clinic said that if people are using black market cannabis, they're playing Russian roulette, which I think's actually ridiculous for reasons I'll explain in a minute. So then they mention a study which took place in the UK in the cities of Northumberland and Manchester. Weed that had been confiscated by the police had been tested there. According to the researchers, 90% of the cannabis contained things like mold, yeast, very high lead levels and things like that. But a key evaluation point here is that you don't know how the police have stored that cannabis, you don't know how they have kept that cannabis, so they might have confiscated that cannabis and shoved it in the corner of a sort of holding room or wherever they keep their weed and left it for 12 months and then tested it. These are really serious evaluation points, but the cannabis clinic here seems to be generalising that across all cannabis on the black market or the legacy market and giving the impression that 90% of the weed on the black market is dodgy, so buy it off us instead. Here's the study that they're referring to. They only used 60 samples in the study, so you can't generalise that at all. So if they would have said, look, we've got these 60 samples, we're not sure how they were stored, but just to let you know, they did contain this and this, but it's only 60 samples from 2 cities, so we can't generalise that further afield. That would be more credible, but all this context seems to be left out. And then they mention another study which looks at data from Weddinos. Now, Weddinos is a harm reduction outfit put on by the Welsh government, and if you think your drugs are dodgy or you want to get your drugs tested, then you post that to Weddinos and they will test it and publish the results on their website. It's a fantastic service. And they say out of 1,600 samples that have been tested by Weddinos, 43% actually contained no natural THC. I'm presuming the rest contained either nothing or maybe semi-synthetic cannabinoids or even fully synthetic cannabinoids. But the point is, again, the main evaluation point here is that people will not send their weed to Weddinos unless they think it's dodgy. So out of everyone who thought, oh, there's something wrong with this weed, I wonder if it's dodgy and I'll send it for testing, 43% of those ones contained no actual naturally occurring cannabinoids. But again, the cannabis clinic in this article has basically presented this to the public without the evaluation point, and they're basically given the impression that 43% of black market or legacy market cannabis contains no naturally derived cannabinoids. Again, I think that's really misleading. The reality of it is, and I can tell you this as someone who's consumed cannabis from the legacy market and for about 2 years from the medical legal market here in the UK, that on the black market, every quality of cannabis is represented, all the way from very poor cannabis, cheap cannabis, all the way up to extremely high quality cannabis. And it's the same on the medical legal market. You've got very poor quality cannabis. There's been problems with mold with UK medical weed, and then all the way up to extremely high quality cannabis, in my opinion, and everything in between. You know, you can get fantastic cannabis. In fact, the best cannabis at the moment, the highest quality cannabis, still is on the legacy market or the black market. Now, medical cannabis is getting better quality all the time. So at some point, I expect that in the coming years, it might well overtake the legacy market. But to give it the impression where, oh, you're going to be playing, in their words, Russian roulette if you're buying it on the legacy market, it's just not true. And you do start to lose some credibility when you say things like that. Look, I'm a journalist, I have been a journalist for 10 years, and I can tell you that all media is biased in some way. So if you look at this particular article, you can see that the news outlet wants to shock and get clicks in order to generate advertising revenue. That's their business model. And the cannabis clinic wants to sort of take people from the black market onto the legal market, so they want to drive sales. That's their business model. And this video that you're watching right now has a clear bias in favour of abolishing the unscientific drug laws. So let's not pretend this is objective journalism. Everyone plays their role in this awkward dance, and it's fine as long as everyone's aware of it. But you know, anyway, I'm trying to get this channel off the ground. Feel free to like and subscribe.